I don't know if you got to get to chat to Lizay Engelbrecht, they're the Sanlam CEO. She's pointing then to trying to fit the business into perhaps trying to create a more sustainable path moving forward for the entity. Do you see that happening? Do you see Sanlam able to, rejig its business around in an environment that has always been, I suppose, very difficult to navigate?
Yeah, look, I think there is a need for a company like Sanlam, short-term insurance, obviously in Africa, where I think if you look at most operations, most individuals, they probably are underinsured when it comes to the risks that they face. Unfortunately, of course, at the same time, it's the ability to go and basically afford the insurance that's a difficulty in this current environment. We are seeing a number of factors that might be negative for them. For instance, regarding, the kind of economic slowdown we are seeing, if we see the kind of like pullback in, for instance, car sales that we're seeing in Asia at the moment, possibly linked to Corona, possibly linked to other factors, hitting South Africa this year, it could be quite negative for them. So it's going to be quite difficult to operate in that environment. That being said, like I said, this is a company that provides a product that is needed, and hopefully we will see something like that, helping them go forward. One point of interest is, of course, the president's remarks, the finance minister's remarks around the road accident fund and the possibility of compulsory third-party insurance, which might be an interesting, aspect for them going forward.
Yeah, My Way has certainly done well for them as well. Growing that business, I suppose, has certainly been of keen interest for them. But I wanted to actually focus on Standard Bank, and it's it's certainly very difficult to get an interview with the CEO with them. Seemingly, their PR firm not necessarily doing the job they certainly should in that regard. But it has been a tough time for banks. We saw Nedbank struggle. Standard Bank has continued to just fight on, I suppose, and it's in direct competition, I suppose, in many ways with First Rand and different aspects of that business. But is Standard Bank still surviving the way it should, or are they perhaps facing the even tougher times now?
Look, the entire banking sector is facing tougher times. Standard Bank is trying to actually adjust to these times by cutting branches, cutting staff numbers, and trying to move people from going to a branch to using their tablets or their phones to basically do their banking. This is, I think, is the way of the future. If you look at where banking is likely to be in, say, 10, 20 years' time, I would expect the majority of banking to basically be via online facilities. And a branch, network is not as going to be important as it was in the past. One of the dangers of this is that the advantages that companies had that had a branch network basically are going to be diminished greatly, meaning that they're much more vulnerable to competition. So things like the Time Bank, etc., are likely to be huge players if they get their strategy right in this market. Facing huge competition from these kind of operators is something I think Standard Bank needs to adjust to going forward. But I think they are making the right steps. Whether or not it'll be sufficient, I don't know.
Yeah, that becomes the I suppose, million-dollar question really for them, and things become a whole lot more difficult. All right, Viv, overall this market picture, coronavirus, of course, yes, still impacting things. We're seeing a flood of money perhaps back into the market as well from the Federal Reserves out there and the like. Is that going to be enough to sustain the market?
I don't know. Look at yesterday's massive rally that you mentioned about in the US markets. We're already seeing Europe down today. So our market started a lot more positive than it is right now. So last time I checked, slightly positive, but it was a lot more positive earlier in the day. I think temporary measures might be positive for the market, but I don't know if we're going to be comfortable until we can see what the real impact of corona is. And to give an idea, the kind of stats we're seeing around non-China infections at the moment mean that they're doubling every 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
What that would mean is in about a month's time, we would be seeing somewhere close to about 2 or 3 million people outside China basically infected. If we can see those numbers coming through, the impact is going to be pretty substantial. However, this is all depending on the kind of infection rates that we can basically get down to. If we can see serious steps to get the infection rate down to maybe doubling every month or even less than that, and then we might even have a very limited amount of people being infected by this. But right now, the way the trends are showing with this explosive rate of infections, I would expect unless we do something serious, that we would probably be seeing over 1 million infections by, say, the middle of April, which is obviously going to have a huge impact on the global market.
Yeah, you think OPEC then will also look at cutting supply again then in order to perhaps aid that market as well? That price going down to around $50 a barrel, they won't want it too low.
In one hand, yes. The other hand, I mean, I don't know if Saudi Arabia actually benefits from cutting right now in terms of revenue increase. I think the Saudis will actually find it more difficult. And that being said, I mean, one thing we haven't even talked about is the fact that if you look at, Iran, okay, it's one of the most affected places outside China at the moment. I think South Korea, Iran, and Italy are the three big places that have been affected. And we've seen a number of government ministers, getting sick. You can imagine also, if this does turn into a global, pandemic, some of the oil producing countries that are key to global production, places like Venezuela, places like Libya, places like Iraq, don't have the strongest, governments don't have the strongest ability to adjust to these kind of factors. And so we might actually see, unintended, cuts, unintended disruptions to oil production should, Corona really become a huge issue out there. And at the same time, like I said, I'm not so sure that the Saudis actually benefit revenue-wise by cutting right now, especially because, demand is so low that, other producers out there who cheat can easily take up that excess supply.
Yeah. Viv, always good chatting. Thank you so much for the time. Viv Govender from Rand Swiss joining us live from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange there in that market outlook. Now, my